I'm the current UK Waterstones Children's Laureate, and I'm the author and the illustrator of the How to Train Your Dragon and Wizards of Once books. I'm so glad you've joined me for the Reading is Magic Festival. Each day is themed around a point on my Laureate reading charter, and today's theme is a celebration of the joy of reading, because every child has the right to read for the joy of it. Every time a young person reads a book or a poem without them realising magical things are happening, I'm always saying that reading gives you magic powers or develops your magical powers. And the magical powers that they particularly bring out are a magical eye. And with the magical eye, a book helps you see into the mind of somebody else. They're wonderful at developing. There's a word for it, which is empathy, because things on a screen happen out there, while in a book they're happening inside your head. So books, when you read a book, it gives you a magic eye. It enables you to see into somebody else's life and what it might like to be somebody else. So the greater empathy, that's a great magical power. Second one is intelligence, magic thoughts. Films are wonderful, but they are very visual, and but books are all about words. And the more words you give somebody, the more they inhale them joyously, the more interesting and more intelligent the thoughts you can have. And the third one is creativity. Magical hands, magical eyes, magical thoughts, magical hands. Creativity, because books are much more, films can be very bossy, whereas books, you have to use your imagination to fill in the gaps. So they're great at sparking creativity. And that's not all. Research shows that as long as you're reading for the joy of it, you're likely to be happier, healthier, more likely to vote, more likely to own your own home, more likely to not be in prison. And these are powerful, measurable, real-life benefits that can transform lives. And the great thing is, it doesn't seem to matter what your background is, where you come from. These powers can still apply and develop if you're reading for the joy of it. So every child does have the right to read for the joy of it. I hope you find this event joyful.
Hey everyone, I'm Kiran, and thank you for joining us, and thank you so much to Cressida for that lovely introduction for today's theme. Reading for the joy of it is so important. I think that's where we really find the magic. And two award-winning authors who have magical worlds and adventures in their books are about to join us to talk about just that. So please welcome Jasbinder Bilan and Kiran Millwood Hargrave.
Hi everyone, I'm Jasbinder Bilan and I'm the author of Asha and the Spirit Bird and Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar.
And I'm Kiran Millwood Hargrave, author of books with very long titles such as The Girl of Ink and Stars, The Island at the End of Everything, and coming soon, A Secret of Birds and Bone. And welcome to the Reading is Magic Festival.
Kiran, can I start off by asking you a question? I love the way how in each of your books the magic is so different. How do you decide what sort of magic you're going to put into your books?
That's a really great question. So I think for me, writing tends to be quite instinctual. So I trust and follow my instincts. So I'll be led by other factors such as the setting or the characters. For example, in my first book, I knew I wanted to create this island from scratch. And so that was really exciting because I could create the rules from scratch. I could create the magic from scratch and present something that was maybe a mix of natural magic that we might find, in the world that we live in, and also a little bit of my own sprinkled on top. But in my book that's coming up, A Secret of Birds and Bone, I very much wanted it to feel more on the edge of what could be possible entirely in our world. So I'm asking questions about faith and things like that. So I like to mix it up, but I'm very much always led by my setting and sort of where I'm setting my books. What was your favourite magical story when you were growing up?
Well, I loved magic in my stories, and these were always the books that I went to over and over again. But I think my favourite was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Ah, that's a good one.
Because, yeah, I loved it because it was an ordinary situation. The children are in this kind of big old dusty house where you think nothing's going to happen, and you know, by some magic, that ordinariness turns into something extraordinary. And also, I think it's kind of like something like that because the magic happens in the wardrobe. It's the sort of thing that everybody had in the 70s, like when I grew up. I had an old Victorian wardrobe in my bedroom, and I used to quite regularly kind of go in there and sort of rifle through the coats and clothes.
Yes.
And I was searching for Narnia, and I knew, you know, with that kind of commitment and you know, the sureness that you have when you're that age, that if I searched hard enough, one day I was definitely going to kind of find Narnia.
I think that's something that's so wonderful about the world is I had a wardrobe too, and actually in the back of it my grandfather had painted like a circus scene.
Oh, wow.
I used to think if I could look long enough, you know, one of the clowns would sort of toss his hoop into the air or take off his hat. So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of mix of imagination and kind of confidence in imagination, because I think that sort of the lines are really blurred when you're a child.
Definitely. And I think being an author is all about trying to hang on to that blurring and actually, you know, like in Peter Pan, I do believe in fairies, and clapping your hands and really believing that you might be saving a fairy's life. You know, I think being an author is all about holding on to that and saying, no, I do actually, you know, I do believe in the magic of this, even if not in magic itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, like you say, as a children's author, you go back to that stage and that kind of moment, and you really sort of relive it. All of that, you know, not to step on the cracks in the pavement,
Yeah.
that something like terrible is going to happen, or kind of like the really, you know, like you say about the kind of fairies clapping to kind of make them appear. What sort of magical realms and stories inspire yours?
I always have what I call books of power on my desk when I'm writing, and they are books that are inspiring the story that I'm currently working on. And there are a few that never really leave my desk, and one of them is Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, because I think he does so beautifully with dust and with the other realms what you were describing about, you know, it all being possible and magic nudging up against our world, and indeed being found in our world if only we knew how to look hard enough or well enough. And I love the idea that, you know, there could have been just rubbing up against me, you know, another world, another version of me, or something, or that my cat, who is currently sitting on my desk, you know, could be my demon in another world. And that is a constant for me, that the wonder that I felt reading that, and how I utterly believed it, and still do to a certain extent, because it's really just quantum physics. You know, there might be other worlds, other realms with different laws of physics and science that would read as magic to us. And another writer who I really love is Joan Aiken. And I had this most beautifully illustrated collection of stories called The Necklace of Raindrops. And the illustrations in that just blew my mind. They were sort of silhouettes of black, so it was just black, and then against them were all these sort of rainbow colours. And it was sort of like a conjuring of reading itself. You know, you start with just these black and white letters on the page, and then suddenly it just bursts into technicolor in your brain. And so those are the two books that are sort of constant in my stories. Do you have particular magical realms other than Narnia that particularly inspired you?
Well, I think that for me, sort of like the magic is, you know, like you're kind of saying about when you're thinking about your story, it's all the different kind of possibilities that there are out there. And I suppose kind of especially I was a really kind of dreamy child, and when I'm kind of writing, you know, I always kind of try and go back to that moment, and we've talked about kind of reality and imagination blurring, and I think in my mind it really was kind of like that. And I have kind of like a really clear image of when I was growing up. I used to, there was something that I remember would appear on the top of the wardrobe. And this was kind of like a smaller wardrobe in a different house. And I used to conjure up, or I used to see little people, and they would appear and they would do dancing for me or kind of act things out as if they were telling me a story. And I only needed to ask and they would appear. And that's kind of like an image and sort of like a sort of magic that's really stayed with me. And so it's only actually really, really recently that I've realised that it was just my imagination. Really recently, because I kind of often think about that and the way I used to just sort of magic them up and they'd kind of come and entertain me.
Well, you say just, like, imagination is, it's incredible. It's so powerful, and it can be, the greatest force for good and the greatest force for evil. You could have chosen to terrify yourselves with those little people, but instead you chose to, entertain yourself, and that's so wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you've kind of answered this question, really. But so, do you believe in magic, Kiran?
Of course I do, and I'm not saying that in a sort of glib way. I really do believe in magic as a thing of wonder, as a thing of things we can't explain. And I think back to even Victorian times, only a couple of hundred years ago, when things like electricity were seen as magic, and that inspired books like Frankenstein. There were people who would reanimate frogs, and make them dance and things like that. And I do wonder, actually, if it's nice to leave some stuff unknown, unexplored, unexplained, and especially when there are great stories that come into those gaps and explain and offer other explanations that are so much more exciting than something that might actually be true.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of a little bit like in my debut, Asha and the Spirit Bird, I kind of wanted to create this kind of whole sense of the science on one side that kind of Jeevan embodies, and the sort of the imagination and ancient beliefs in spirituality and things like that Asha believes. So all the time, they're kind of going along on the journey, and Asha is kind of thinking that the Lamagaya is her Naniji, and Jeevan thinks that it's not, and it's all that kind of toing and froing, which we have kind of completely in our world. And as you say, it's just beautiful and amazing to think that there are things that we can't explain.
Yes, and I think we probably grew up with a similar sense of that sort of, I suppose you call it spiritualism more than anything else, that where such things are possible. I have family in India, and my uncle absolutely believes that he sees his father, and I think that's a wonderful way to live, and it's a way that I hope to live. So is that the way that you tend to create magic when you write? Do you think about what's possible, brushing against the impossible?
Yes, I mean, when I'm sort of at the very early stages of creating my story, I like to kind of just be very, very open, and I think just sort of like have thoughts and be able to kind of draw them to you without putting any boundaries on my thoughts. And maybe sort of, quite often I'll go out into the sort of starlit sky and just kind of look out there because it's so incredible, and try to connect with all the different people that have ever been there under those stars, and all the different worlds, like you say, who knows, we're kind of like a speck of dust, and kind of cast this magical net, see what you can kind of bring in, and And then when I come to start to write the story a little bit, I'll light a candle and create that magic and see what happens, and kind of like opening your heart and opening your mind to a story that's going to kind of unfold.
That's exactly what I do. Is I always light a candle, and it's always scented, something to do with my book. And I think it's such a lovely way to write. And anyone listening who wants to write, I would really, tantalize all your different senses. Don't just think about, it being a brain thing. It's also a whole body experience when you're writing and when you're in that zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like creating your sacred space and your writing space, and lighting the candle creates that zone as well. So, yeah.
I always think as well, what you said about a speck of dust really stuck with me, because I think the difference between people hearing that and thinking, oh gosh, we're just specks of dust, and the people who hear that and say, oh wow, we're just specks of dust, are people who believe in magic and people who don't. Because I think, to believe in magic is really just to believe in imagination and to believe in the power of a story to completely transport and sort of crowbar open the world for you. And I think that, yes, I think that reading really can be magic in the way that it offers all those different perspectives and makes you feel less alone, even though we are just this tiny part of the universe.
Yeah, definitely. Would you tell us a little bit about your new book, A Secret of Birds and Bone, and share your favourite quote?
Yes, so A Secret of Birds and Bone follows a girl called Sophia, and she lives in a house that's built of bones on the outskirts of a beautiful Italian city called Siena. And she lives very happily with her brother, their pet crow Corvith, and their mother, who is the world's, possibly, or at least Sophia believes her to be, the world's best osseurist, which means bone builder. She makes beautiful things out of bones. But even more than that, Mama has a very special skill, and it's one that only Corvith, Sophia, and her brother Ermin know about. And so the line I'm going to read is from her explaining what Mama's special skill is. Only they knew that their Mama was not solely a bone builder, she was a bone binder. When she made something, it was not merely beautiful, it was blessed by the spirit of the person whose bones have been used to make it. Some might call it magic, but Mama thought that made it sound like superstition in the realms of fairies and ghosts. And this particular magic was bone-bound, earth-made, rule-tangled. And now I'd love, love, love to hear a bit from your new book, Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar, which I've read and think is absolutely just sublime, but I haven't heard you read it, so I want to hear.
Thank you. So this is from my latest book, Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar. It's another magical realist story set again in the Himalaya. It's about a girl called Tamarind who travels from her home in Bristol to stay with her mum's family at their grand ancestral home in the Himalaya for the very first time. While she's there, she discovers a secret garden. She befriends a mysterious mountain girl and her monkey Hanu, and begins to uncover the family secrets surrounding her mother's death when Tamarind was a baby. And this little quote I'm going to read is the very first time that Tamarind sees Hanu the golden monkey. I dart my eyes towards the open door and spot the very end of a long, honey-coloured tail of what looks like a trail of sparkling gold dust.
Gorgeous. Oh, it's been so, so lovely to talk to you. I could talk to you all day.
Yeah, same here. It's been a really, really lovely time to talk about magic and reading.
And thank you so much to everyone listening. And remember that the Reading is Magic Festival has so many amazing events for every age group. So make sure you have a look on the website and find more great chats.
Yeah, and it's all free for schools and families and everyone to watch and listen to and enjoy. So hope you all enjoy it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jasbinder and Kiran. That was awesome. It's so interesting to find out more about what inspires authors and how they come up with their stories. I wonder, have you ever wanted to go on an adventure? An exciting journey? like the characters in Jasbinder and Kiran's books. What a great idea for a story. Now, where's my pen? I think I've got an idea. If you enjoyed this podcast, there are lots more on the Reading is Magic Festival website. If you'd like to purchase any of the books you've heard about any of our events, you can find out more information on how you can support your local independent bookseller on our website. The link is in the description of this podcast. Reading is Magic Festival is brought to you by Bath Children's Literature Festival and partners, and they would like to thank their sponsors and supporters for allowing the festival to be free for all to enjoy. To see a full list of the amazing sponsors and how you can donate if you're able to, please do head to our website readingismagicfestival.com. And lastly, thank you to you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. You can let us know by using the hashtag readingismagicfest.